In fiction, pretending to accept or delay or otherwise waffle.
Right. That's
Yeah,
the
I
that's
saw
the
some of
word.
that
Yeah.
happening.
And I saw it a little bit in the other session too. There's a deep desire to sort of ameliorate whatever it is that the opposition, you know, is presenting by trying to kind of walk your way around it. Sort of like we can talk our way through the orcs if we bore the GM enough.
Did you? This is an important question, I think. Did you see that only in prices?
That's a good question. I can't say.
Okay.
It may, I think, not be limited to prices. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that happened in our game. The King Kong game, unfortunately, is beginning to blur all too quickly in my mind. There are so many games we played,
I'm sure.
but
But
I'm
a
trying to get
lot of
this
that,
down before. Tried to get that reflection down before it went away.
a lot of that might be fixed by just being very explicit in the rules for prices.
Well, yes, I get it. I mean, I'm not really making a huge criticism out of it. That's
Sure.
just part of the that's sort of those
And
bullet points you're looking at are pretty much just notes to myself of ways to talk about these things.
yeah,
Um,
no, I appreciate that criticism. I've seen it a bit myself. So, in the sandbox versus build the
this is
box.
yes, this is actually a big deal. Um, the word sandbox has been picked up by role players as a great thing, a wonderful thing. We want
Yes.
sandbox play, and I know, and I was quite pleased when William used it in a far more negative sense.
I
After
was actually confused by his use of
right,
it.
well, he was saying we don't want to just be in the sandbox. If you're in the sandbox, that means you can put the toys in different spots. But so what?
Hmm.
That's all. That's what he was talking about. Is that it was a instead of being able to make the toys do what you want, you're just allowed to set them in different spots in the same damn box. That's what he's referring to. He's like he was worried, kind of wondering whether we're not sort of trapped in the sandbox. You know, sort of
Hmm.
the way he put it, and I think that was putting it a really good way. However, if you go back to the points about where does backstory and relevant characterization and the content of prior relationships and the content of those problems. You know, does Una hate Morgana? Right? That's my point. We need to know that. Does we're Morgana and Merlin lovers, and this time we won't be squicky, and we'll say they were consensual and adult. But were they lovers before he basically abandoned her to focus on Arthur?
Mm.
Stuff like that. It's when you have power over such things, when someone has power over such things, that you are building your preferred parameters for play rather than going and sitting in the sandbox. So that's why it's a big deal. You can have all the structure that you've got, and that's not quite what makes it the sandbox, right? The now it is your turn to be the actor. What do you do? Okay, what does the opposition do? The structural elements of it. That's not actually the sandbox. The sandbox is having a fixed set of borders regarding what's happening and about what these characters are willing to do. That is the overly constrained trivial form of play. And if this is to teach role playing, then the whole point is not to do that. You can have a simple and fun model to use, but the simple and fun model to use, you actually have to be able to build your own sandbox.
Do you think, to what extent is this a problem with just what you said previously about how there are all these points where it's unclear who gets to say what about whom,
Well,
and
that's
if those were
it's
tightened up?
related. Yeah, they're tightly linked. I mean, this is the problem. If you provide it all in the papers in the text, then this is Merlin's and Morgana's prior relationship is like this. This is why Una and Morgana don't get along. This is what's going on between Guinevere and Arthur. If you just laid it all out, or provided extremely narrow strictures within which to operate for those things, then William's worry would be, borne out. It would be justified.
Which is why I specifically made all of those things vague.
Right, but the question is, they're not going to be vague at our table.
Right.
So how does it get unvague at our table? Who says? Can you make? I'm playing Merlin. I'm the actor for Merlin. You just made him a pedophile. Now it comes around to my turn as actor. What do I do now? Does he get to do that? I mean, that's a pretty good question.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. That's the kind of thing that we're dealing with. And of course, then you have the fun of trying to turn this into a text without 80 pages of legalistic niggling about, exactly how you do and don't do that.
No, that's okay.
Right. So then,
no, that defeats the whole purpose.
Exactly correct. Yeah. So then, what else is on there? Anything? I think there are.
Yeah, there's a handful more. Reconsidering the Polaris model entirely / partially.
Just
didn't like it?
No, I'm not talking about didn't like it. This isn't a Roger Ebert thumbs up, thumbs down situation.
Okay.
This is a matter of thinking critique. We have to say, is this really serving the purpose? Because what you're doing is you're putting people who are completely new to this into 3 learning curves, not 1. And if you have these differing authorities per role that my previous questions would imply you have to have, then that means that each time a person takes on a role for the first time, muse, actor, opposition, other muse, not in that order, you know what I mean, that as they take these on one at a time, that they're going to have to undergo the learning curve for what it is they have authority over again. And is that really the way to do it? Or do you just, to be very blunt, the easiest thing imaginable is that you have, you limit it to actor and opposition in a different way. And you have people who have fixed roles at the table.
Yeah, no rotating roles, in other words.
Correct. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Maybe it would be a good thing if you had multiple rounds. You see, it's related to the rounds issue. And then if you want to play a different, if you want to do it differently, well, you can play the damn game again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this time it's a different character who's the actor. If that, you see what I mean, though?
I do.
I would not say this if the learning curve were not an issue here, but it very much is. This game is supposed to be the learning curve. You should probably have them switch roles next session, rather than next class meeting, rather than right there in this one.
That does make sense. It does obviously, require a complete reconstruction of the game.
Well, that's the problem with coming to me.
No, that's fair. Yeah. That's absolutely fair. And I have to digest that one. I think that's a very good critique.
Something to think about, yeah.
I'm very much okay. I think I said this before. I see it as a win if 4 people stumble through, do it very badly, and then at the end of it, and this is what I've seen every time, whether I've played or not, is people go, "Wait, okay, I want to do this again now that I understand."
Which is good. If that win is there, then the win is there. Because again, the true win for teaching purposes is for the student to come back, not because they have to.
Right.
That's the, even if that class was just a mess that first time, You're not going to win any award. No one's going to give you an Oscar. You know, nobody's going to. You're not going to win any teaching awards if anybody watched that particular class session. But the
Right.
students come back and they say, "We trust you. We're interested. Let's try that again." Right? Then you're
Yeah.
good. So, so okay,
Yeah.
but I raised it
Cool.
for that purpose because again, there are three things to learn there.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have, or possibly four. Then we have the next one, which is what?
Player and character options. I know, not William, but the other guy wanted.
It's confusing. Willie and William. Yeah.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
all right. Well, the taller fellow
Right. William.
wanted some. He wants to make his own character, which is a very common sentiment.
Right. And so the idea being that there's the possibility of playing. Well, he had two issues. Number one is the possibility that you would play the game once and then you would play it again as the next chapter.
I thought that was cool.
Yeah, well, we were all very taken by our Dark Arthur, you know, and and what the kingdom was like for a few decades at that point. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it all sort of struck us as that's a pretty badass, you know, fantasy setting all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And we there was that, and then there's the issue of making up characters de novo, you know, where, but really, of course, you know what that would mean. I'm not saying it's a problem, but what it would rest on is new problems for the realm.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of like these are the disasters, it would almost be more like hopes. So you could even say in part two, you say, what are the three hopes for the realm?
I also thought of you could come up with, if you wanted to do a campaign, you could just come up with a quest every session and try to accomplish it every session, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting ideas all show up. You could say, rounds two is okay. Now we're a bunch of knights that have gathered to help Arthur. What's that going to be like? Morgana is still out there. Stuff like that. We have that. Then there's the issue too of, well, this is supposed to be pick up and play. And I think even William was really steadfast on, don't even show them that option until you do it right, until you do it first. Don't even hide that one at the bottom of the box. Make sure they don't see it, right?
Right.
And so that, however, it's an interesting point. If you have a viable mechanism here, he was concerned, as he also said, is this thing really just for that learning? If you play this and it does its job, and then you say, I feel no urgent need to play this ever again. It did its job, and I'm done. This has done for us what it can do for us. And that's related all the way back to the beginning. If it's just the sandbox to sit in, then that's going to be the response. Even if it does a great job teaching a few things, if it's just that one little set of, interlocking parts that you just Rubik's Cube into a new shape each time, then you're not going to want to do it again. So the key then is all the way back to building the parameters of the problems and how we do that as part of play.
The problems in the land.
Yeah. What is that? Why? What is the substance of each problem is a huge part of play. And
meaning, like, why do we care?
No. Why are Arthur and Guinevere at odds?
Oh, sure.
And other elements of the interrelated backstory that are deliberately not given to you, but somebody's got to do it. Insofar as the replayability goes, that's where it is. That's where you get the replayability. And it also ties back to our first session of discussion when I was all about why does it make a difference that I'm sitting here and not you? And that's the same answer.